know what that means either.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Smith County Visioning session for the Statewide Leadership Council. We're all really excited to have you here. We're going to be talking about our policies and the agendas for this session, but I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Toon, and let me tell you why Smith County is so important to me. I grew up in East Texas. I'm actually from Kilgore, Longview area. But when I got out, I had to report in Smith County. And I think there's some other people in this room that are from East Texas. So you can kind of understand what the challenges are culturally when you live in this area and you have a criminal background. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how that affects your reentry and your success. So, to start us off, and we'll introduce the other members of the Statewide Leadership Council in a little bit, but to start us off and kind of get us thinking about what we're doing here today, is I'm going to invite Cynthia up here to have a conversation with us.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, so I'm Cynthia Simons. I am the Women's Policy Fellow at the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. I lead the Texas Women's Justice Coalition, which is a network of formerly incarcerated women or people that are very close to the issue, and I'm also a member of the Statewide Leadership Council. So today we're going to ask a few questions that kind of get you thinking about what it's like for incarcerated individuals when they come back into your community. So I'm going to ask the questions and I will appreciate some feedback. So what is the hope that you have for people that are system impacted returning to your community? What is something that you wish they had, or that they, opportunities that they had, or something they had that you wish they didn't have? Yes. Right, that's very good, because we all know the foundation of success lies in how to gain employment. Without those things, you don't have stability, and if you don't have stability, it's very hard to put your focal point on the mitigating factors, is what it seems like at that point in your life. Anybody else?
It is everything I believe that it's going to be started from system. They need a social worker to help them guide and maneuver. I didn't have to be in there a few months or how many years. It's a culture shock to walk out of jail and have this big job and also be self-sufficient. Not only that, you're putting on the family members you don't even know anymore. Many of them have children. Some of them have new partners in their life. It's an adjustment, and without either counseling or a social worker to help guide you through that scenario, the likelihood of recidivism is really, really high. And I said that about myself, and I started school, that a social worker appointment with youth release would really highly increase their ability to succeed in that community.
Right. I absolutely agree. That's a really good point. Something I haven't heard yet at one of our previous visioning sessions, but thinking about it, that is absolutely something, a tool that people can use, because there is a culture shock. You are meeting people that you haven't seen in a number of years again, so it's like forming a new relationship. So that's a very good point. Yes.
You know, just kind of to add on to what she said, if not a social worker, they need a support group. Because only those that have been incarcerated know what it feels like to get out, and the culture shock will change, because you can get out of prison after many years and feel very lonely. And all your friends that you know are inside, or, maybe, the people that you have known over the years, you have grown one direction, and your family or friends have went another direction. So you can be very, very, very lonely.
Yes, absolutely. So I hear a peer support group for people that have been formerly incarcerated, for people that are reentering. I think that's a really good idea as well. Definitely something needed, so that you can have somebody to relate to, somebody to feed off of, and seeing is believing. So if you're able to see somebody that has encountered the same obstacles that you're now encountering and overcame them, that is hope. So that is inspiration. And sometimes some of us getting out, that's all we have. people who have been formerly incarcerated that are now returning to the community? Yes.
They're not prepared, they're not prepared emotionally, they're not prepared technologically, they're not prepared for what they're about to walk into. And I see a great failure in our system that could be focusing on reentry measures to help people coming out, and they're not. So my concern is, especially somebody who's done more than 10 years, they can't operate a cell phone, they don't know how to do a self-checkout at a grocery store, they don't know how to operate a bank card. The simple things that we have to do on a daily basis just to pump gas, they are not able to do because they've never encountered anything like that at the gas pump before. So there's a lot of things that need to be interwoven into the system as they're coming out to help them adjust to how we operate out in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely, very good point. I talked with a gentleman who had done 14 years, and he got discouraged from filling out job applications because it was online, and he was too embarrassed to tell the people, I don't know how to use a computer. So not only do we not have these simple trainings and these simple preparatory things for people coming out, but we're also not making them comfortable in the space. Because if he was comfortable in the space, he could have just said, ma'am, I've been incarcerated for 14 years and I can't do this, would you show me how? But the environment is not conducive to somebody being able to be transparent and vulnerable and saying, you know, this is my experience and this is what I've gone through. So absolutely, there's a great
I will say, Houston, or TDCJ itself has started a mentoring program. This is something really, really new. Because I was already a TCJ volunteer, I was able to get accepted as a mentor for education. But when I talked with the chaplain out of Houston, he let me know that the mentorship goes further than that, like appointment, and teaching you how to do a resume, and how to dress professionally, and things like that. And he says that because you're working with the Section 2 Women's Counseling, your focus is on education. And so he says they don't have enough volunteers right now. And so that was something that really opened my eyes to the fact that TDCJ is listening, and they're trying to do something, but unless we're all willing to step up and say, hey, we're available, right now he's having very minimal success. When he realized I was in the East Texas area, and I was in the Houston area, he immediately told their Freeman, which is the lady I work with, that he wanted to expand into other areas, and she's like, wait, I don't have enough people to expand into other areas, I need to focus on this area right now, until we get people in, because she's, like, I'm from East Texas, the other lady's from Dallas, and she's from Houston, and so he's got an idea about what to do with it, but
Okay, I hear you. So we need our community to get active. We need our community members to get active, and we need to educate our community members on what's going on, what people are facing in reentry, because I believe a sector of the problem is people don't know. People think that these things are already in place. They think that these things already exist, when in reality they don't. So they need to know, hey, these people are coming into my community and they do have these issues and they're going to live here. So are we gonna give them the tools so that they can survive, or are we gonna leave them in survival mode? The community will probably want to give them the tools. Okay, so that's our icebreaker. We got everybody talking, warmed up. Thank you so much for the feedback. Next, we're gonna have introductions from SLC members. I've already introduced myself, so I'll hand it back over to Jennifer.
well, Cynthia, tell us about your work.
Okay, so at the Texas Women's Justice Coalition, I make sure that a woman's perspective is heard in all conversations. When we're talking about drug reform, bail reform, those are definitely women's issues, because although incarceration in data shows that it's on a decline, incarceration for women is on an increase. Women are prescribed opioids at a higher rate than men. So therefore, they are going into addiction. Women have very unique barriers when they re-enter back into society, because they were probably the primary caretaker of their children. The family ties is the #1 way to prevent recidivism. It is even that much more imperative for a woman, because we are naturally birthed in that aspect. We are naturally caretakers. So to not allow us to be reunified with our families, to not have transitional homes that are family friendly, so that we can get our children that are languishing in foster care, and we can then provide healing for them instead of generational incarceration, generational trauma. So I'm all about a women's perspective. I'm about reallocating funds. I'm about family ties. We have several bills this session. One of them is family reunification. It will allow a parent who has had their rights terminated to petition the court 2 years after the rights have been terminated, if they have substantially changed the reason for removal, are able to provide a safe and stable home for the child, and it is in the child's best interest because we always want to uphold that. We have another PMC bill that gives guidance around those women who have managed to keep their possessory rights, but just didn't meet that 12-month window. 12 months is a very short time when you're somebody who's been in a domestic violence relationship and you're trying to revamp your life. If you've been through substance abuse disorder, any little caveat in life that became a barrier that you had to overcome, 12 months is just not enough time. So for those women who maintain those rights, but there's no way to enforce them, and they're burdened with a hefty $5,000 on average fee in order to enforce visitation or to modify the order. So this would require the judge to check back with the parent every 2 years and see if their situation has changed. So then that also gives hope for the parent. They know they didn't meet the 12-month window. Well, this judge will check back with me in 12 more months, so if I just keep on the path that I'm on, in those 12 months, I'll be ready for my kiddo to come home. And then they can see what I'm doing. They can see that I have fallen short and that I'm better than my worst mistake, because our kiddos will one day too make mistakes. So we definitely want to reinforce that you're better than your worst mistake and that you are able to overcome. We have a bill that expands education access and accessibility within the TCJC system. I partnered with Lori here. She's with EWOC to help develop that bill. We want to make sure that women have equitable access to programming inside of TDCJ. There's a bill on inspections, random inspections with our county jails. There was 8 women dignity bills passed last session. A lot of them had to do with pregnancy and how women are treated during pregnancy, not being shackled during giving birth, not being put in isolation immediately after giving birth, because you have so much trauma that you just went through, having the baby ripped from you, being incarcerated. I have 3 children. The birth on its own is a trauma. So you can't put someone in isolation for 30 days and think that they're going to be okay. There's no therapist going to see you. There's no OBGYN checking on you. So this bill does require a mental health professional to make contact with the individual as well as an OBGYN, so that we're taking care of them physically and mentally. And it would allow the inspections to be done randomly to make sure that everything is in compliance, because if there's no oversight, there is no way for us to make sure that the bills in which they were written are being implemented. So those are just a few things that we have going on this session.
So, like I said, my name is Jennifer, and what I love about the SLC, and what you'll hear as each member presents, is that we all cover a special population. And because when we talk about incarcerated folks, there are forgotten populations within that forgotten population. So we appreciate the work that Cynthia does with the women. And where I work is Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. And some of the priorities that we have this session are uses of force bills. I know this sounds pretty shocking, but teachers are not held to the standard that even parents are when it comes to use of force, believe it or not. So we wanted to tighten up that language and really not take that tool away from teachers, but to really, make sure that they understand that that's not a form of discipline. Because a lot of times children with disabilities, their manifestation of their disability sometimes comes across as disruptive behavior to a teacher that doesn't really understand that population. So we worked on some bills with that. I specifically worked on a bill that was recommended by the Governor's Council for people with disabilities about mental health and the intersection of mental health and IDD, which is intellectual developmental disabilities. And this bill would call for an advisory council and have a member from across the board, somebody from TDCJ, somebody from the Juvenile Justice Department, higher education, a person with lived experience. And this council would start to look at best practices across the state for people who have mental health and IDD challenges. And the problem is, and this is why we need the advisory council, is that a lot of times a person with, say, autism or any form of IDD, they go for mental health services and they say, well, we can't treat you, you have IDD. It's probably just a problem with your IDD. So you go to mental health services and they're like, oh, no, that's your IDD. It's very siloed. It's almost like going to the doctor and them saying, you have diabetes and high blood pressure, we can only treat one. That's what it feels like for a person with IDD and mental health challenges. So this would look at best practices across the board and make those recommendations to kind of get those barriers out of the way for these folks. So those are some of the things that I do with the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. Maggie, would you like to come up and share who you are and what you work on?
Okay, so for those of you who do not know me, my name is Maggie, and I help run the Statewide Leadership Council, which is a group of formerly incarcerated individuals who are all pushing for meaningful change. And, you know, I always hear that the person closest to the problem is the one with the solution. And so I've been said, like, the Statewide Leadership Council just makes my heart smile. Because we're all people who've been there. And when we go to the Capitol, we tell them, this is what's happening inside. You know, they can't tell us no, it's not, because we've been there, you know? And so I've noticed senators and House members, they have a disconnect. They believe that whatever's coming up the pipeline, that's what's happening. And no, it's not. So the reason why I love the Statewide Leadership Council is because we're all powerful and we all have a voice that nobody else, you can't go to school for what we have, you know? You can't make it up. We have something that they'll never have. And we will never change anything until we, get up and say something. And so, anyway, I work for the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. I am the Hawk Foundation Peer Policy Fellow, and a whole bunch of other things. But I'm so grateful that we're in Tyler today. Next month, we're gonna go to Rio Grande Valley, and our goal is to go across Texas and to inform people like us that we have voices, you know, and when we leave here, you have connections to us, and we will help you, guide you through the process. If you need anything, you have a whole team ready to support you inside of Texas. So, I'm really glad to be here. I'm so glad everybody's here, and I don't know who's next. Vinny, Mr. Vinny Hernandez.
Hello everyone, my name is Benny Hernandez. It's my first time in Tyler, so it's very beautiful out here. I actually like the geography, and so, like Maggie mentioned, the SLC is barnstorming the state of Texas. And what we're doing is organizing people who have been incarcerated to join us in this fight for criminal justice reform. Because like Maggie said, only those who are closer to the problem can identify the specific areas that the academics, that the lawmakers, that the TCJC administrators can't. And so we're the voice, okay, for not only the formerly incarcerated, for the community in general, right? Because mass incarceration touches on so many aspects of our community. So I'm currently working with the Texas Civil Rights Project. I'm in the intake division with them. I help identify areas because we have limited resources with our organization. We litigate on some aspects, but My particular department is the department that identifies and works with our staff attorneys, so they see where we're gonna put our resources. I like it, okay, the TCRP is doing great work. I'm formerly with the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. I was a statewide, coordinator of their Lock the Vote campaign. The ACLU of Texas, I did policy work with them. And I just 2 days ago got accepted to the University of Texas, LBJ. So, there's hope, okay? So I just got out less than 120 days ago. I did 10 years left. And within that time, that span, I've been able to get into UT. And, you know, there's hope. These institutions, across the country, people are recognizing that a person with a criminal record, there's more and more of us, and that we probably have too many laws on the book, or something's wrong because this mass incarceration has just grown so much and it's touching so many areas that people are starting to take a second look at what's happening out there. And so that's beneficial to us, and we have to be the voices so that they recognize what the problems are and what the solutions are. And so I'm honored to be here today in Tyler, Texas. I appreciate you guys, and I'm going to pass it off to Laura.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, my name's Laura Mellinger, and I used to live down the road at 206 East Elm Street. I had to look up the address to make sure that I had it right, but yeah, I remember that place. And so being in Smith County is bittersweet. It's kind of a little bit stressful, but I'm sitting here and I got to drive into town today or yesterday knowing that the only thing that anyone could do to me was give me a ticket. Because I'm free and clear these days. So, live in Austin now, part of the Statewide Leadership Council, moved to Austin from Abilene. And I think the biggest difference that I see, I work with women coming out of prison, I do bring entry services, and I think the biggest thing that I see in Smith County is the need for a little bit more attention. I come from, when I rolled out of TCJC, I went to Abilene, which is a very, very forgiving community. And so then I go to Austin, things are progressive there, we've got band and box, and so those things I would love to see in Tyler. I know that there's a church just about on every corner, and I think that we all deserve the same. I work, like I said, with EWAPS. It's short for Empowered Women of Purpose. We're about to change our name, so watch for that. It will be a little bit more telling of who we are and what we do. But I work with about 160 women right now. And because I remember every challenge that I faced within the community, I think it's not only, well, first of all, I get paid for it, but that's not really the deal for me.
It's nice.
My mission and my calling to help the women who are coming after me. Jen said that we all kind of have our little jam in mind as women. And I think that, I'm not down on y'all at all, but I always feel like men have a little bit more. So I want to stand in the gap.
Yes.
Thank you. Testify, you know, I mean, Maggie could agree with that. I'm part of the Women's Justice Coalition. I started getting involved when I was a year out of prison, and I think that this has been a game changer for me. So having to be in Smith County, I'm happy I don't live at 206 East Elm Street anymore. Who's next?
Kirsten. Margie.
That's what we do.
Hi there, my name is Kirsten Ridditz, and I was previously incarcerated 2 years ago. I got out and really had a radical transformation in my life, very grateful for my relationship with God. And I started a nonprofit helping women coming out of prison. We have a transitional living home now in Houston, Texas, and a discipleship program there, and we help them re-enter. We've partnered with a local restaurant that provides jobs for the women when they come home, if they choose to work there. They don't have to work there, they can go to work wherever they want, but we've got a little bit of community involvement, and I'm hoping that we can bring things up a little bit and get more people involved. Outside of that, I got my bachelor's degree in political counseling, and I'm working on a master's in human services with a concentration in criminal justice, and I will proceed from there for my PhD, God willing. We'll just keep on the track. And, this, just a few months ago, I got my nursing license reinstated after 17 years. I've got an interview this Tuesday. The work that I do in the nonprofit for the women to help them in reentry is a labor of love. It's not something that I get paid for. I actually work and make my own money to help support myself and my family. The Statewide Leadership Council, I'm on the steering committee. I'm a member, and when I started out on this track in advocating for those who were previously incarcerated, myself and Maggie were part of the Anthony Graves program, the Speakers Bureau, that helped train us to go to the Capitol. We worked with the ACLU on the Women's Dignity Bill and the Primary Caretaker Bill, and that's how we started getting involved in all of this. So now it's just another step forward and saying, okay, where do we go out to the community and talk to people who have been through the same things that we've been through? And so that's why we're here today, is to do an outreach, make connections, network with the previously incarcerated, and help others get involved in what we're doing so that we can make some significant changes in our state today. We need help, because although we do have a voice, we would have a greater voice if we all came together and were transparent about the issues that we're facing in getting jobs and housing and reestablishing relationships with our loved ones. And that's all I have.
Thank you, y'all. I'm really honored and privileged to be a part of the SLC, to just be surrounded by such an amazing group of people. When I got out 2 years ago, and I was on that horrible leg monitor that did not allow me to do very much, I got to know all of these wonderful people just by constantly harassing them on Facebook and Twitter, and just, hey, my name's Jennifer. Hi, I'm Jennifer. And I'm so grateful that I did, because what I discovered was that, at the end of the day, when I'm having a hard time and nobody seems to understand, it's always involved. And the barriers that I've faced, the help that I've needed has usually come from somebody who's been incarcerated. Other folks too, who are loving and are able to give that second chance that we're going to talk about. So, I can talk on and on. Those of you that know me, I know that I can do that.
Let Margie and Ariana.
Oh, okay, great. Before we get to our guest speaker, let's hear from Margie.
My name is Margie O'Neill. Currently, I am an LCBC and have been for about 9 years. Finishing a master's degree for clinical mental health. I'm part of the SLC, and it started with women's justice movement, the dignity bills. I was president in March, and we went to the retreat, and we did a visioning session similar to this, and then we lost our leader in our new, which she's done very well to fill that role. But today I saw where the juvenile justice bill passed.
686.
Yes.
Passed the House.
Second chance, that's big for me, and I'll tell you why that's big for me. I work in a core facility for teenage boys. I work with the throwaways, the IDP boys, the ones that no one else wants to work with. This is their last stop before they go to TYC. We only have 2 houses that house 16 boys in each house. That's a very small, minute amount of boys that gets second chance, because if they successfully complete the program, then they're sent home and they're discharged from probation, and so they don't have any further consequences. The harder ones, I fight really hard for the difficult ones to stay, because if not, they move on and go to TIC, and we don't want that to happen. So I am very hyper-focused on the juvenile justice part of that, because that's what I do for a living, but I also have a very big passion for the women's justice movement and what's going on with the men. I have a brother that was sentenced to 57 7 years for possession charge for his possession charge. He'll never come out of there. Recently, he was trying to go into his cell, his arm was caught in the cell door for about 20 minutes toward this muscle here. He was not given any kind of medical care, and so I filed the agreement with the Busman. The Busman sent me a list of when he had been in there, and all that shows is that he had been in there. It doesn't show whether he got an x-ray or was treated or whatever. I also have a son that is in Tdcj, that is serving a 15-year sentence. He's served the majority of his time in immediate custody and in solitary confinement. And so then I have a grandson that was not given the opportunity for treatment and was sent to TCJC. He wasn't in there 2 weeks and had his nose broken. And he was bullied to the point of he gave up his code for the phone, and I was getting calls from someone the whole time we were at the retreat. I was getting calls from a young black man that was saying, I gave your son some free presents and food, you need to give me a freeway. And if that's how these kids are being treated in there, and then that's how our loved ones are being treated in there, this makes my decision to do what we do even more powerful for me. I also, across the spectrum, wanted to do something for the elderly, so I volunteer with Meals on Wheels. So I take servant leadership. I'm told all the time you're an overachiever, but it's not that. It's just that everybody has needs, and if we're not willing to do that, they don't get it all. Recently, I joined the board of the Second Chance Women's Council out of Houston, who provides educational tools for women that have been system impacted. So what they do is they come out, they fill out an application, we send them study material, and we also pay for the GED. So Tara Freeman, she paired up with Chaplain Fleming out of the Region 6 office, and he signed her on as a mentor, signed on to our program, signed me up as a mentor, and so we work on the education part. So I meet with the ladies, I think 1 day a week, we meet, we talk about not only the education challenges, we talk about what challenges are you having when you be down here. What do you need? What can I refer you to? Is there something you need help with? And this is a fairly new program, and this is something that's very much needed, because if we don't step up to help the people coming out, what are we doing by just changing the laws? Changing the laws is just the beginning. It's that assistance that we give to one another when they come out of there that's going to make the most impact on everybody that's involved. I hope that y'all, if you're already a TDCJ volunteer, it is very easy to become a mentor. You can't become a mentor without already being a TDCJ volunteer. And if you want information on Fleming, or Mr. Fleming, I'll be glad to get you that. I hope that this mentorship program will start to begin to alleviate some of the issues. The women seem to thrive with that one-on-one time with somebody that's been through it and understands. I also work with TBT, Truth Be Told. That's where I started, was Truth Be Told. Truth Be Told, it's been a brilliant organization. I've been there with them since 2006. I'm very saddened to hear that Katie's resigning and that we lost Pat Kraft as well. But I'm hoping that when they get somebody in those places, that they look to hire from somebody that is like us, system impacted. And I had a long conversation with Katie last night, and I understand that change is inevitable and that she needs to move on and do things with her life. But I'm hoping that whoever takes those positions has the women at heart for, because you have to have heart for what we do. If your heart's not in it, why are you here? You know, and they're gonna know if you're doing it for the money or if you're doing it because you care. And I have this conversation with my boys every time, and they go, oh, you just love me. And you just know I'm doing it because I love you. I'm doing it because I care. I'm doing it because I don't want you to go to those places. You know? So think about why you do what you do.
She's, ever since Ariana got out of prison,
she has these feelings, and so she's like an emotional factor. So, it's a little bit different, she's been cold and hard.
And with recovery, that's possible.
Yes.
So, my name is Ariana Mellinger. I am a member of the Statewide Leadership Council, and I'm thankful to be here today. It's very close, not 2-year date of post-incarceration. With that, I can feel feelings, I can give hope to others, and I can also let people know it'll be okay, and that's part of the work I do today. Is I work with youth who are impacted by serious mental issues, serious mental episodes. And part of that work I do is through the justice system and come to us and say, hey, you know what, they've had this issue and they need help, and they work side by side with the mental health provider to be able to do that. I'm thankful to be here today. I'm thankful to give hope back into the community that is so important to me. I am from the side of Texas, Jacksonville area, that I've spent a lot of time here in Tyler. This community is important to me, so that way they can feel it. They can then give rehabilitation to others who desperately need it. Thank you.
Thank you all. So I'm very honored to introduce somebody who is going to share their experience in Smith County, and Tracy, come on up.
Thank you, sir. This is a beautiful thing to be able to come back and give, your story, or to see so many people, impacted by the criminal justice system and be able to speak. And people look at these different people who have gotten up and spoke as if people are a number, that people in prison or people that don't change. Just quickly, briefly, I'll just tell you a little bit about my story. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of convenience and comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. You see, that quote by Martin Luther King, that expresses, my life. 25 to 26 years ago, probably a block away from this place, Smith County Courthouse, there was a young man, 19 years of age. A young man, 19 years of age, stood in front of a female district judge who must not be named, and was standing there for sentencing. In the midst of being sentenced, this young man's mother was in attendance. And it was a criminal justice class that came in to witness proceedings of sentencing. So as this judge sentenced this young man, she said, Mr. Williams, you'll never have to worry about it again. Either he'll die in prison of HIV, the gangs will get him, or he'll be so old he'll never have to worry about it. That young man was me, 25 years ago, sentenced to 2 50-year sentences for aggravated robbery. No mitigating circumstances were taken into account that it was my first time ever being in trouble. No mitigating circumstances were taken into consideration by the district attorney or the judge that, maybe we should be a little more lenient on it. But the component of mercy, here, right here in Smith County, sometimes we forget about that justice should be balanced. So sentenced to 2 50-year sentences, as my mother watched on, that judge could not determine my future Only God could. Because people do change. And, as, this week, we were at the Capitol, and we were at the Capitol, Maggie, Jennifer, and so many other people in this room were at the Capitol, speaking out and testifying for bills because we wanted the people in Austin to know that people change. And our stories represent that. These are the voices of the people that have been inside. So we do change. So the judge had the right to speak something on my life that ultimately did not come true. So when I went into prison, I, found who I was, my purpose. I was able to, spiritually transform, Christ transformed my life. And being transformed, I began to pursue education. I began to pursue a mindset change. Because when you go to prison, there is no way you can ever be the same. There's only two realities. Either you're worse or either you're better. And so going into prison, I was able to pour myself into educational opportunities, getting a couple of associate's degrees, and then later on getting an undergraduate degree. And being a part of a program, the Texas Field Ministry Program, where I was able to go into the largest unit in the state of Texas and begin to minister and talk and by outreach to men and ag SEG in different places. Because I had been changed and I wasn't the same person, they often throw the statistic up that people age out of crime, which they do. But as the bills, they just said House Bill 686 was passed, and how young men's mind and brain is not developed, that is the same way with me and so many others that have been in prison. We were not able, to understand, and so these things weren't taken into account. So being able to be in prison and give back to young men, to try to help them set themselves on the right track. Because the question you always have to ask, and legislators and people should ask, is what type of person do you want to come out of prison? 95% of all people that are incarcerated will get out one day. One day, they're getting out. So you have to ask yourself, now, what type of person do I want to get out and live beside me? So it is always in the best interest of rehabilitation and education, which is a drop in the bucket. But being in prison and also, going through this program, I was able to just give back. And it was just a stepping stone that pushed me into what I am now. And so I was set free or made whole. I like to say made whole last December. I was released on my first parole. And it hasn't been without its problems, but I value, that commercial that says it's priceless. That freedom is priceless, just to be able to go out and walk outside and just enjoy fresh air. I'll go to the refrigerator and get whatever I want. And so I was released last December, and currently I work for the Texas Inmate Families Association, TIFA. Support, education, and advocacy is what we do, and reducing recidivism by reaching out to family members. And currently, I am the director of outreach for them, trying to build a statewide reentry network to be able to help men that's coming out of prison. And so I'm also a graduate student, just got accepted. So I'm on track trying to get my PhD too. So people do change. And these people in here are a witness that people do change. Well, there's one thing, in the midst of the trauma as a young man, trying to understand why I was unwanted by my dad. I dealt with all this inner turmoil. I was 100% guilty of what I've done. And I thank God that in the midst of the commission of my crimes that I didn't physically harm or maim or kill anyone. And so people do change. And so dealing with this trauma of trying to understand who I was, I learned purpose. But I didn't understand that there's always a multiplier effect. There is a bigger, and I think Cynthia said it, the generational degradation of incarceration of what it does to children. I had 2 young children. I subjected them to the same thing that my dad, who had the chance to be in my life, that didn't want to be in my life, I subjected them to the same thing. And so this incarceration of criminal justice issues is so much bigger than what we always discuss. Because you always got to ask yourself the question is, do I want a parent or someone there to be mentors or also paying taxes to the community so the communities won't be destroyed and go into ruin? It's just kind of like throwing a rock in a pond. And you just see the ripple effects. So statistics say that my children are predisposed to go to prison or die. That's what statistics say. Thank God in heaven. But because of my X gene, the X on my back, or my scarlet letter, which I'll always carry, just like the X gene, I got an X on my back that now I have transferred to my children. So criminal justice issues are bigger than what people try to convey, because it seems to me that we have forgotten the mercy component of criminal justice. We have forgotten that. We have forgotten the humanity of people. Not discounting anything you know about victims, but people change. And so, in spite of that, reentry and parole, my reentry and parole experience is because I had support. I thank God for the job before I got out. I had a lot of support. And, being here in Smith County, we are a rural county. And, often I think, about my time. I don't regret, going to prison. I tell my mother all the time, it matured me. But sometimes you think if I was in an urban county, I would have got less time. So, looking at criminal justice issues, we have to think about here in Smith County, as well as other places, rural counties, how can we better come together? Because coming back to this place, I still see the dichotomy of the separation of the parts of town. I still see it. I mean, I've been gone for over 25 years, and I still see within this city the growing south side and the west side, and the flagging east and the north side. So there is a lot of work to be done. And I thank God I'm here and have an opportunity, and there's so many people that want to help bring about change. And so, re-entering back into society, I just seen my parole officer, matter of fact, it was yesterday, and I had to pay restitution. So, because I have a job, it's a lot easier for me to make the restitution payments, but some people may not get paid as much as I do. And so this is something, that we need to take into consideration is, a person is already paid 20, 25, 30 years and then have to come out and pay restitution upwards to $200 to $300, on top of trying to survive with their bills or trying to survive of helping take care of children. So these are issues that the Statewide Leadership Council and other places are addressing, and we are thankful for that. Get my driver's license. Because of COVID, that was a chore for me. But, it also, it was a patience building experience, as COVID has changed everything. And so re-entering back into society was so much easier for me because I had support. I had family. But everybody doesn't have that family. Everybody doesn't have support. And the last thing I'll leave with is, and I think that in this re-entry process of having been gone so many years, you know, often people talk about institutionalization. I would like to think, you know, that I didn't have a lot of those big hang-ups when I got out. But I realized one thing is, if a person doesn't begin to prepare inside prison, his journey or her journey is going to be so much harder when they get out. If a person had lacked social skills inside, his or her journey is going to be a lot harder. And God forbid if you're in restrictive housing, administrative segregation, locked away 23 hours a day, 7 days a week, your social skills are none. And they have even a greater challenge to re-enter society when they get out. And so I realized one thing as I begin to try to balance, you know, about school and work and home life and getting myself established, opening up a bank account. Thank God I already knew how to work a computer, the internet, social media, all these things. It was so much coming. And I handled pressure pretty good. But finding a balance of also having a personal life. Because you can concern yourself with so many things and so many other people that you are no good for yourself. And so counseling is something that people should get when they get out.
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with an adjustment disorder, which will go away, you know, among other things. They said all the trauma of being down in the tough on crime era, you know, and it was a violent time back in the 90s. So they said you have to have some kind of level of PTSD. But I realized that I had adjustment disorder because I had changed, and people that were family members, I didn't know them anymore. Who are you? That's what I was like, who are you? And so that adjustment disorder, for a while I began to feel like I'm alone. And that's something about incarceration that all you can identify is that when you are incarcerated, there is something forever changed about you. And so we have a lot of things that we need to do to try to help returning citizens, because they are citizens. We need to think about their humanity. Let's think about what the Constitution says. I mean, I won't go there today. Let's think about what it says about the individuals, the people that live in this country. There's no such thing as a second-class citizen. It's not supposed to be. And so we have to think about these issues as we advocate and continue to push forward for change, because Gandhi said it best: be the change you want to see in this world. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. You are a beautiful human being. Thank you for sharing all that. And I don't think any of us could have said that. So let's talk about some of those bills. And I love what Marty said earlier. Like, you can work on laws and bills all you want to, but you got to do the work when you get to the community. So I want to honor that. Thank you so much. So Maggie, why don't you come up here and tell us about the Clean Slate bills?
bills that we wanted to get passed this session. And so we're gonna talk about some of them. And, I just wanna say, I really appreciate, Tracy, your story, it was amazing. You said so many truths in there, like we are coming home, you know? Not everybody gets a life sentence. What type of person do you want living next door to you? Or do you want, because I'm gonna be mentoring somebody's child one day. Maybe that person is judging me right now, but then they're gonna come looking for one of us. Because we're the only ones that can get them through that. So, thank you, Tracy. So, we teamed up with the Clean Slate Initiative across, the nation. There's, Clean Slate bills being passed right now. Michigan passed, a wonderful bill that said that all of your civil rights were restored when you finished your, incarceration. You pay your debt to society. So which is, I mean, it would actually make so much sense if I went to prison, I did all of my time, but now I'm punished for the rest of my life. You know, I can never rent a home in a place that I would want, a nice neighborhood, and, you know, getting a job. When I first got out, I put in 177 applications online, and I know that because I got every denial in my email, and I would put it in a folder. And so, I made it to several interviews. I got to the second one, and then by the time I get to the third one, they send me over to HR. And I would say, look, I do have a background. It's a possession of less than a gram, and tampering with government documents. Okay, that sounds bad, but I mean, it's really not that bad. I mean, anyway, so that was one felony that second chance people will not work with. So I didn't know that if you're a second chance company, you have a list of felonies you're allowed to work with. And unfortunately, mine was not on that list. So we have partnered with the Clean Slate Initiative. You see our shirts, says the Clean Slate gives you new wings. And so the meaning of that, a Clean Slate is a package of bills. So it would provide record clearance automatically to people who are already eligible. So if you're eligible for your record to be cleared right now, you have to petition the court. You have to hire an attorney to file the paperwork. So, and if you can't get a job because you can't get this off of your record to pay this attorney, it's a cycle that is perpetual, you know, and it just snowballs. So it's very difficult. It usually takes courts at least a month to schedule a hearing once the petition has been filed. And some people don't even know the process, so they don't even go through it until they get arrested down the road because they never got it cleared. They're like, oh, I didn't. I thought they said that was going to come off my record. Yeah, but you have to pay for it. So we are, we have a bill that will help automate that process, meaning that if you're eligible, the DPS will go ahead and once it's time, it'll fall off, which is what we thought was already happening. But you know, there's a lot of common sense things that are not very common sense, but you know, so we're trying to get the automation. We're also trying to expand the eligibility to more charges. So more people are eligible for this process. Now, I know anybody in here will never, ever qualify for a misdemeanor non-disclosure. So, like we say, in the SLC, we would most sooner grow wings than to be eligible for record clearing. So that's where this is flying, because we believe that we are going to be eligible. We just have to continue this effort. We have to continue this narrative and teaching people that we deserve a chance. And Texas is gonna listen to us just like all over the nation. People are realizing it's good for business, it's good for communities, because if we can't go back to work, what do you think crime is coming from? Poverty, desperation, fear. That's where it all comes from. And so if we are given another chance, and I can speak for myself, when I got out of prison in 2017 with no home, my glasses were broken, I was wearing Tdcj floppy shoes, that were, that was all I had. But somebody believed in me, somebody gave me a chance at Santa Maria, I love them. They surrounded me in a holistic way. They gave me time to heal spiritually. They gave me time to grow up. I didn't know that I was still a little girl, I was throwing fits and getting high because I wasn't getting what I wanted. So we need that holistic approach. And if somebody cannot support themselves, then, I don't know what you expect from us. If we cannot, I just don't know, because the minimum wage is not even a living wage. And then the places that we do get approved for are disgusting. In terrible neighborhoods where, I don't know if you know, I can spot a drug deal going on a mile away. So, that is one of our initiatives, is we're trying to expand this process so people like us who have been convicted, who have completed their sentences, and who have done their time can have a pathway to non-disclosure. So we do have that second chance. So that's the Clean Slate package, and the bill numbers are all in the folder. So I guess we're gonna go over the legislative process, please? Yeah. I'm gonna let Benny talk about the legislative process, how you check the bills and, that we make sure that everybody has the bill numbers. So, thank you. Here's Benny.
Thank you, Maggie. So, the process that in the legislature is the bill is filed by a member. So, a lot of people think that the members of the Texas legislature spend all their time thinking about ways to improve the law. That's not true, okay? So, a team normally lobbyists for corporations and us, advocates for the nonprofit community, we go there, we tell them, these are the ways that you can improve public policy, and this is how this is what it affects, and this is, what it does. And so members look at it, they judge it, they say, okay, well, we'll follow it. And so once the bill is filed, it goes to first reading, and that's where the clerk of whatever respective chamber, the House or the Senate, assigns it to committee. And once it's assigned to committee, it will have a hearing, or it will not have a hearing, depending on the chairman or chairperson of the committee. So part of that process is trying to lobby for a hearing, okay? And it's more complicated than it sounds. It's not easy. There are, on every legislation, there's people who support, people who oppose for whatever reason. And so part of that process is trying to compromise and find middle ground and find where we can, rather than focus on the differences, find how we can work together to improve public policy. So once it goes to committee, and it goes to second reading, and the second reading is where the members actually debate about the legislation, and there's a formality of third reading, and then it passes out to whatever respective chamber, and it does the same thing vice versa. Either in the Senate, whatever bill comes from the House goes to the Senate, whatever Senate bill goes to the House. And so that's the legislative process. Jen, did you want me to specifically talk about the our bills, or did we? Okay, so the SLC has 2793, and it's bill by Representative Jarvis Johnson, Democrat out of Houston. Excuse me. It's a common sense parole bill, okay? What this bill does is it helps TCJC, it improves their system, it streamlines their system so that individuals, once they're incarcerated, they are issued a ITP, an individualized treatment program, right? And so that's a misnomer. It's misnamed because it's not individualized at all. It's a form that's sent by a U.S. Postal Service to someone and says, here's what you do to make parole. And if you do these things, that you will be favorably by the parole board, but that's not really true. So what happens is you get this ITP, no one reviews it with you, no one tells you this is what you need to do, this is how you do it, this is where you roll. And so when someone has a reviewable parole, and they get denied by the parole board for whatever reason, right? And it says, well, you need qualifications of your ITP. No one told me about my ITP. No one told me what I can do to improve myself. No one came to me and sat down with me. It's like Martin was saying earlier, we need social workers, we need caseworkers, we need managers within the system, because what we have right now is wasteful. The wasteful, just in parole law, 2793 has the potential to save millions of dollars in incarceration costs, okay? Because just think about this for a second. Even using a conservative number, let's say 20 people, the average incarceration cost per year is roughly about $20,000. We get away with it on cheap here in Texas because we don't provide any services. We don't give food, we don't give AC in the summertime, you know? So we have a pretty barbaric, backward system here. And I'm just gonna be honest about it, okay? There's a lot of ways that we can improve conditions of confinement, there's a lot of ways that we can improve our system. And that's why we're here today, because we're trying to do that. And so we're trying to rally Tyler, Texas, Amarillo, Texas, Westlake, Texas, we're going across the state, telling people, come on, think about that for a second. When's the last time anybody asked a person who's been impacted by the system or incarcerated, come to us and give us your ideas, We want to hear from you. We want to know, that this is something special, this is something that hasn't been done before, and I'm just, really honored to be a part of it, to be a part of this process. So, I'm sorry, I got kind of in the weeds there, but 2793 was, it's our common sense parole bill, and it addresses the ITP process, and like I was saying, it has the potential to save billions of dollars, potentially in incarceration costs, by helping individuals identify what they need to do to make parole. And if somebody makes parole the first time rather than the fifth time, that's 5 years of incarceration costs that can be saved. So that's where I go with that.
Thanks, Dave. And, it's so funny is that when we testified on that parole bill, and Tdcj did exactly what we thought they were gonna do, and they said, we already do that. They already get an individualized treatment plan. We update it every year, and you could hear the entire room groan. It's like, oh, as soon as he said it. One of the representatives on the committee, and we all love her and respect her, she's amazing. She asked TDCJ again, so you do that? So you mean all these people that just came up here and said you don't do that? What do you say to that? And he was like, oh, no ma'am, we update it every year. And she said, she reminded me of my grandma. She was like, okay. And I was like, just that alone was powerful for me. It's because maybe one or two other committee members didn't believe us, but she did. Yeah, and parole is an absolute mess. Like we testified, that society and legislators think they understand how parole works in the state of Texas. It does not work like that. And for TDCJ to get up there and say, oh, we do this and we do that, and we don't know what they're talking about. A group of formerly incarcerated people are not going to come all the way to Austin to lie about individual treatment plans. They're just not going to do that. So we hope that they voted out of committee and that the House will pass it. We're very hopeful for that. One other bill that we worked on that we're really proud of, actually it kind of manifested out of the statement that the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition made with the Statewide Leadership Council was about emergency planning, and I believe that is HB 2331. Is that right, Cynthia? So what that would call for is a separate advisory council to help TDCJ with emergency planning. Because, and we also testified for that, is that TCJC has experienced emergencies, right? Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Rita, COVID, heat, the latest winter storm. And it seems that they just can't get it right when it comes to emergencies. So this would actually create that advisory council, which includes somebody with lived experience. That's what was powerful to me. Because like Benny said, in the going on 27 years that I've had to deal with the criminal justice system, it has always been like I'm just this podium, or I'm just this microphone, or just that chair. And everybody else in the room made decisions about me, what was best for me, what I needed, what works, and no one consulted with me, no one asked me, because I was just a criminal. I was like Tracy mentioned, that they see us as a half person, like property. And actually, if you don't believe that TDCJ sees us as property, if you do self-harm in TDCJ, they will write you up for destruction of state property. So that's exactly how they see us. And so we're coming into this new type of reform where let's ask the people who are closest to it because they have the solutions, right? Because you can have all the education, all the academia that you want, and that's great. But those policies, if you don't understand what that life is like, if you don't understand the culture, if you don't understand the experience, your policies don't mean anything. So we're hopeful about the emergency planning bill. I think that would be a step in the right direction to start holding them accountable to make better emergency planning. Because if anybody's ever kept up with the articles from Carrie Blankinger from the Marshall Project, I do. Her reporting over the last year concerning food, the conditions, especially during the winter storm and COVID, it just really highlights just how badly TDCJ has allowed conditions to get. And I wrote something for the Tyler Loop that exemplified just how bad it is. So this is an important bill, and we hope to see that also passed.
Discussion Q&A about bills, myself and Lori.
Okay. Would y'all like to lead that discussion? And you can combine that with the next part about how that might yeah, okay.
Sounds good. So I'll take the question on board. Okay, so anybody have questions about the bills? Anything that they have discussed, anything that I quickly spat out about the women's justice bills? Any questions? No? Okay. They want to hear from you. So let's talk about how these bills affect you or affect your family. How would they affect your community if they were implemented?
So let's think that way.
It would provide different opportunities for employment, different opportunities for housing.
It would knock down some of those lifetime collateral consequences, right? If you could get automated non-disclosures after a certain period. So you served your sentence, you came to the community, you proved yourself to be a productive member of the community. So now you're at an equal playing field as far as housing and job, which this gentleman said earlier, that's something that he would like to see in people reentering into the community, because we all know that is a daily basis for your foundation for success.
Ariana, what are you going to study when you get university use?
Social.
And so tell me about the licensure.
So the licensure in order to be a social worker is very difficult with somebody who has to practice. And that being said, is we need more people with background in order to help others to be effective.
Yeah. So Margie talks about having social workers in the reentry process, and I think that's fantastic. So any kind of clean slate non-disclosure would help remove those errors person and their nursing lives.
So I have to go on psychological, forensic evaluation done. It cost about $5,000, all the movies that I jumped through to get this nursing license when they stated, and then nobody wanted to hire me. So even though the nursing board said, okay, we will reinstate your license because you've done all this stuff, but nobody else said, oh, company policy, we can't touch you, we don't hire people with a background. So I know that one of the things I did in my interview on Tuesday is, that it's a miracle that God even put that in place. But this bill of non-disclosure would change the opportunities that possibly the future may hold for me, like becoming an RN or an LVN, or even becoming a nurse practitioner, because nobody that has a record like mine is in those fields of operation right now that I know of. So,
And those improvements for you, for Ariana, you and Lord, with Kirsten, those will help you, yes. You get to accomplish your dreams, you get to go up in your career field, your education preference. What would it do for your family? What would it do for your community?
well, it would enhance the opportunities that I have to provide for my family. It would also pave the way for the women who are coming out into my residency program to say there is hope, and you have to work hard, and you have to be diligent and committed to it, but you can do this, and you can overcome what the state says you won't.
Absolutely.
It also takes away from some of the studies that you see out in the community, studies that have been, away from those trauma disease and outcomes.
So generational living.
Even to be a direct counselor, when I started my journey, I had 7 years from, the conviction, 7 years of prior conviction to become a licensee. So even though I had finished school, I still had a 6-month period that I had to wait until I could license. Some of the things that the Association of Addiction Professionals is doing is working on doing away with some of those stipulations, or trying to make them smaller, but we've been trying to do that for a number of years now, and haven't had no success. Same thing with the LPC. I've been fortunate that I've been out 15 years, and so that's not really gonna fall back on me at this point, but if it could be any time sooner, I would be struggling to get my license when I get into school. Yeah. TDLR is working also to change some of the certification standards. I get an email from them all the time about how they're working on this license and that license, and to change some of the stuff that's attached to them. TDLR is now our licensing guru for every professional licensure. It is not the Department of Health and Human Services. So as I get those emails, I may need to be forwarding it to you guys, so that you're aware of what is where and when. So there is a big drive, not only for us to change the laws, but for us to have the ability to have a professional license in some kind of way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think they said in collateral consequences that the average person does not understand is, and for me, that's always been fun. I love to look at houses on the internet, and I don't know about most y'all, but most times it's a product of, or it's a matter of what can you afford. If you make 3 times what you're making, when you've been convicted of crime, that's not it. And you know that. I was blessed to find the house that I lived in Austin. Right, Jen? You had a struggle moving there too?
Oh, yeah, when I finally got this fellowship, and I was so excited that was my dream, y'all, when I spent all those years with Mountain View Unit, year after year getting denied parole for the same reason. It was, static, like nature of offense, or like I told the committee, I was denied parole because I had a substance use problem, but I can't get into the parole program that addresses it until I make parole. So, and that kills hope, and I struggled every year to just maintain my hope and my dream, and it was one day, again, like Tracy said, about that meaning and that purpose. I'm going to get there, and God's going to put me in the place where it's going to utilize my lived experience and my skills. And I want to go to Austin. I want to get in front of that corrections committee and give them the business. And that's what motivates me every year. And so when I finally, I get home and I was on that monitor and I'm doing my writing, and it was so hard that first year. And I finally get the job of my dreams. And I can't find a place to live in Austin, Texas. Paul, I can't find a place to live. I contacted every apartment locator, and I work with wonderful people, and they're like, well, we need you here. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose this job, I can't find a place to live. And like I said earlier,
when no one else has our back, we have each other. And so I reached out to the members of SLC, and I said, you guys, please help me, is there anywhere? Maggie's like, I got room. Somebody just moved out, let's go. And, it was just like that, and again, God moving in my favor, completely in my purpose and my passion, but it's because our landlords are recovery coaches, and that's understanding, but and what I learned is that it's housing first. You know, it doesn't even matter about a job, if you don't have a place to live, and it feels like a setup for failure. What does society want from us? We have paid our debt, and we can't find a place to live or work a reasonable wage. We don't want yachts and mansions, we want a nice home for us and our family, and we do the work that fulfills us, and it's just one barrier after another.
And if it's in a place like Austin, Texas, how is it here?
Well, let me tell you my experience. Okay, you have to have 10 years for date of conviction to get through for any kind of housing. And it doesn't matter what you're doing for a living or how much money you make, if you've not got 10 years, you can't get it. I finally, when I moved to Big Sandy, agreed to get my background checked. It was the first time in my whole career that I had gotten a yes. And even though I didn't use it, I paid the money just to see if I would get a yes, because I didn't, no. Even though the house I ended up moving into was to that company, it was good to finally get a yes. So if you're not allowed to have a professional license for 7 years after you go to prison, and you're not allowed to have a rent or have a home for 10 years after you get out of prison, that's a long time. That's a long time. I was fortunate that I found my place, and the lady, I lived in it for 2 years, and the lady offered to sell it to me, and she did it on the finance, and it was just like God just opened the doors, and everything went really well. But not everybody has that experience. But I do know what it's like to try to rent a place, because when I first got my license, and I moved to Dallas to work, I didn't go back to West Texas, because at least they knew me for who I was, not for the piece of paper, because I couldn't get an apartment.
That's why these bills are so very important. After I was released, I had a very, very hard time finding work. I had a very hard time finding a place to live. I moved literally to the other side of the United States. I went to Massachusetts, where the pay wage was much better. It was very much easier to obtain a place of living, because they are more restorative, because they are more liberal there. I didn't come back to Texas till I got this job. I was living in a whole other state, but I figured God wasn't done with me yet. So I came back to the churches. But it's absolutely a fight that we must continue and pave the way for the people coming behind us, and for those generations left behind us. And by making them hear our voices and give us equality on housing, on jobs, on access to education, then maybe begin looking at us as an equal, because we are occupying these spaces so many times, so frequently. Anybody else? How might these bills affect your family? That's it. Okay, so closing, Jennifer, you come on back up.
So, in closing, we got a few more minutes. How do y'all feel about today? What do you feel? Let's talk about emotions.
It's great to hear that there's, organizations like the especially people who get actually speak to perspective of all of you, any of this stuff. That's how I feel.
Well, thank you, we appreciate you coming and we appreciate your input, and, I like that. Like, we always wanna leave on that hopeful note. Like, sometimes in these spaces, oh man, especially where I work with, talking about, disability rights, and just seeing the pushback against, it really can kind of be sad and depressing and frustrating, and especially when we get together and we're talking about, like everything we've been through while we were incarcerated and reentry, it can just be so heavy sometimes. But then we all get together and we start talking about the work we're doing and the things that we're seeing change. That is hopeful. And a lot of times I talk to somebody at every female unit in the state of Texas, and they call me with something, and again, sometimes it's heavy to keep taking those calls, it wears me down sometimes. But I try to tell them that. I try to tell them, like, you guys, this is the first time in 27 years that I have seen this type of push for criminal justice reform. I've never seen anything like this. Stuff I never even thought was imaginable or possible. We talk about HB 686, the second look bill. That's been going on for sessions. And those are my friends, and I testified for that bill. They're me. And so, when they call me, and I tell them, you guys, this passed the House. It didn't even have a hearing. One time it didn't even get read. But that's what change is about. Sometimes it's incremental, and we just keep pushing. And when you look at that, you can be hopeful. Anybody else? Tracy?
I would say the same, as the gentleman over here, that, it's hopeful because in the midst of everything that's taken place, last year, and this year, I think the mindset of people are changing. Because for so many years, in the 80s, the 90s, with the super predator and, with the mindset of lock them up and throw away the key, but not realizing you're throwing away a generation. And, we pride ourselves in America of being, the land of opportunity, the land of the free, but, we lock up more people than anybody else. And so, the world often looks to us for guidance. And so with all that happened last year, with so many things going on in society, I think, like you said, Jennifer, people's mind is on change. And, you want change that, is deliberate, you want it to be constructive, and you have to be restorative justice. Because, that's what it's about restoring, returning citizens that are coming back. Like Maggie said, we are coming back. And, here in this city, coming back after so many years, we are a very prosperous little city. And it broke my heart to see so many homeless people on the streets. You see that in Austin. And you think somebody that's coming out of prison that's having problems with transportation, having problems getting a job, having problems and trying to play the parole fees. So what other alternatives do you have other than go back to what you know? If you cannot get the basic things that a person needs in this grand, rich, very prosperous country. I mean, you have to ask yourself, this is why a person will turn to doing something. I don't have no support, I don't have no help. I have to do what I need to do by any means necessary.
Hey, I would like for you to come up here and tell everyone who may be watching on Facebook and in the audience now, tell them the actions that they can take to be involved with the SLC to support our bills.
Okay, so, we will be going back to Austin, but we would love to stay connected. So, we do have meetings every Sunday night. You are more than welcome to look at Zoom meetings. So, we will leave our information if you'd like to stay connected. I put out calls when we need testimony for certain bills, and if you have experience on whatever we may be needing, we would love for you to come to Austin and testify. So, the bills, okay, so 2793, our parole bill, has already been heard. We just need it, looked at, voted on. So if you would call Mr. Matt Schaefer, or Senator Brian Hughes, and tell him to push some of this legislation along, or put in a good word about it, tell him that we will be back. And next time we'll get more of his constituents here. And so, and then also 2331, our emergency plan has already been voted out of committee, which is amazing. And so next week we will be hearing clean slate legislation on Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the morning in the corrections. So we're pretty excited about that. We're gonna go up there wearing our shirts and support each other, and no matter what happens, there's always next session, and we're not gonna stop. So if you have any questions about the process or how you can help, please contact one of us. We have the Statewide Leadership Council Facebook page where I keep pretty much everything that we're doing online. So just reach out and stay connected. And if you have people who have stories that need to be heard or who want to get involved, please send them to us. And like I said, we're here as a support for y'all, so if you need anything, like maybe you want to have another one of these, call us. And if you have, you know, like this, we got the venue here through somebody else, so we just appreciate y'all being here, and can't wait to go back to Tyler. Okay.
Thank you.